Indonesia is a country famous for having a headbanger as a president. I'm sure other presidents of other countries love heavy metal too, but nobody shows his love for this genre as much as Joko Widodo. Even Judas Priest invited him publicly to one of their concerts. But make no mistake, despite being a Judas Priest fan, Mr. Widodo, aka Jokowi, is not a big fan of breaking the law. Just check out this news.
Indonesian president pays $800 for Metallica gift.
The important thing here is not Widodo's love for Metallica, it's the fact that he has paid $800 from his own pocket to keep a gift. You see, when you are the president of a country, it's common to personally receive foreign dignitaries and celebrities. In such cases, the etiquette says that visitors should give a symbolic present to the leader, artworks, antiquities, or in this case, a rare edition of Metallica's Master of Puppets album. As you can imagine, these kinds of presents can generate conflicts of interest. Hence why in most countries it's illegal for the official to accept such gifts. Usually they become part of the state's heritage and they can be exhibited in national museums and things like that. But in this case, Widodo really wanted to have this Metallica record. Being the president, he could have broken the law and taken it for free. In a country like Indonesia, this wouldn't even make the local news. But he decided to do the right thing and pay a fee to an Indonesian anti-corruption bureau in order to keep it. And really, something like this, it was kinda unique for Indonesia. We're talking about the birthplace of the most corrupt politicians in history. And I'm not exaggerating. Literally the most corrupt man in history, according to Transparency International, was one of Indonesia's former presidents. This explains why, in April 2019, 85 million Indonesians voted to re-elect Joko Widodo for another term. He's revolutionized the country for good. And we're not talking about a small country here. It is the most populated Muslim-majority country in the world with a population above 255 million. But by far, here's one of his greatest objectives.
Welcome to the jungle. Indonesia picks site for new capital city.
Yes, Indonesia has announced that they will move their capital by 2024. You don't hear news like this every week. Of course, it's not the first time something like this has happened. Brazil, Nigeria, and Kazakhstan have also changed their capitals, just to name a few. However, the case of Indonesia has a very interesting story behind it. If you've been following VisualPolitik for a long time, you might remember this video where we told you about Indonesia's impressive growth. After decades of military dictators and obscenely corrupt leaders sucking money from the state like a swamp full of hungry leeches, the Indonesian state is finally able to invest. All of this started with Joko Widodo, the man who seemingly has no history of financial skullduggery. Instead of tax money going to the Indonesian dear leader's golden toilet seats, it's actually starting to be spent where it really makes a difference, in infrastructure. So the question is, how does Widodo want to move the Indonesian capital? What's wrong with the current one? And most importantly of all, can he really do it? Well, today we're going to answer all of these questions, but before we do, let's take a look back at the history.
Jakarta, the sinking city.
Indonesia gained its independence from the Netherlands in the year 1949. Soon they realized they had a bit of a problem, and just take a look at this. Indonesia consists of about 17,000 islands. So vast is this country that the distance between the eastern and westernmost parts is over 5,000 kilometers or 3,100 miles. If you didn't think that that was enough, the population is over 260 million. That's almost twice as many people as in Russia. And you can imagine that it's a very difficult country to govern. This situation has also had less obvious consequences, as Eric will now tell us.
As you can imagine, Indonesia needs very expensive infrastructure to connect all those islands, and right now it simply doesn't exist. So what's the outcome of all this? Most of the population is concentrated on the island of Java, and the capital, Jakarta, is overcrowded.
As you can imagine, Indonesia needs very expensive and expansive infrastructure to connect those jungle-covered volcanic islands, and they don't have that. So, well, what's the outcome of all of this? Most of the population is concentrated on the island of Java, and the capital, Jakarta, is massively overcrowded. So on the one hand, we have a city that receives more and more people every year, but has no money to build sewer networks and roads. So it's no surprise when things like this happen.
Jakarta foots US $5 billion annual bill for traffic jams.
Think about it. Today, there are almost 30 million people living in Jakarta's metropolitan area. Since City Hall hasn't built almost any new piping, 30% of families have no running water at home. So what do they have to do to get water to drink? Well, they build illegal wells, and this has two serious consequences. First, the water they get from these wells is dirty and often toxic. Secondly, it changes the consistency of the grounds beneath the city, which has resulted in news like this.
Jakarta, the fastest sinking city in the world.
You see, Jakarta was built in a very swampy area, but with so few enforced regulations, the whole city is currently sinking at a rate of 15 centimeters per year as the water beneath the earth is sucked out. Half of Jakarta is below sea level and the population won't stop growing. In 10 years, it's expected to surpass Tokyo, currently one of the most populous cities in the world. So what can be done? Well, our friend Joko Widodo has a radical solution, and that's move the capital. Not the city of Jakarta itself, of course, just the seat of government. But no, he's not just going to name a new city the capital, he's going to build an entirely new one in the jungles of Borneo. This might sound a bit silly, but it actually does make a lot of sense. Think about it this way. If we move the government and national institutions somewhere else, all the civil servants will move with them too. And with them, a lot of indirect jobs are also going to move as well, and that's going to spread out Indonesian development. Okay, but there is a problem. A move like this one is extremely expensive. Building a city from scratch takes an absolute ton of money. And the question is, does Indonesia even have enough money to do this? Well, let's find out.
Jokowi's legacy.
Yes, governing Indonesia is a hard job, but there are upsides. This country has a cornucopia of natural resources. Gold, oil, gas, wood, exotic fruits and spices, you name it, it's probably on one of those 17,000 islands. And as you already know, because I already told you 1,000 times here at VisualPolitik, having natural resources can be a blessing and it can be a curse. In many cases, the money that you get from that wealth ends up in the pockets of a dictator. And this is what happened with Sukarno, the founding father of the country. After 2 decades in power, he became one of the wealthiest men in his time, and his successor wasn't much better. General Suharto was a military dictator who held power for 30 years and also became one of the wealthiest men on the planet. Here you can see him on the cover of Time magazine in 1999.
How Indonesia's longtime boss built a family fortune.
We are talking about approximately $15 billion of embezzlement, bribery, and looting the state coffers. Yes, this man became that rich from being the leader of a country. In 2004, Transparency International ranked the most corrupt politicians of all time, and he won first place. The greed of Berlusconi and Lula da Silva is no match for this man's insatiable campaign of theft. As you can imagine, all this money simply going to a politician's pocket is money that didn't go to infrastructure or anything else for the public good for that matter. So what happens when the politicians stop stealing? Well, surprising things. Look at this impressive feat of development that the Indonesians are going to enjoy. This news is from March of 2019.
Indonesia's first subway opens in traffic-choked Jakarta.
Yes, really, a city with a national capital and metropolitan area with 30 million people had no metro. You can imagine why. The metro has taken more than 30 years since it was first planned, and the big change that made it possible can be summarized in 2 words: Joko Widodo. With him as Jakarta's governor, the construction started, and now it has finally been finished with him as the president. This is pretty much one of the cornerstones of his administration: infrastructure projects. He has a mega ambitious plan of more than $300 billion to build infrastructure all over the place. More than 3,000 kilometers of railroads, highways, seaports, and airports. Many trips have already been reduced to a third of what they took before. Imagine the difference when it comes to logistics and passengers. But wait a minute, because not everything is sunshine and rainbows here. There is something missing in this formula, and this is private investment. As you can imagine, such ambitious plans need a lot of money, and private money would be a great help in this regard. This explains partly why, despite Widodo's promise of 7% annual economic growth, the country has been growing at a rate of just 5%.
The truth is that Indonesia is a very closed country. If you have a company and you want to do business there, you must partner with a local company. Many industries are still in the hands of the state, and this explains in part why foreign investment still only accounts for 1.5% of the GDP. That figure is quite low when compared to other Asian countries.
And we have to add to this the labor. For example, salaries in this country are 45% higher than in nearby Vietnam, and the severance for firing a worker is the world's third highest. In this regard, Widodo is not very different from his predecessors. In fact, he seems very determined to scare away investors with things like this.
World's biggest gold mine nationalized in Indonesia.
All of this is bad news because Indonesia will really need a lot of investment if they really want to build a new capital. Think about it this way. Nowadays, the capital is on the island of Java, where 60% of Indonesia's GDP is concentrated. The new capital will be on the northern island of Borneo, which has just 8% of the GDP. Changing the capital will certainly be Mr. Widodo's legacy. It will be his magnum opus of building projects, and it will not be easy. According to the government, the total cost will be $33 billion. That's the price of 2 Olympic Games. Widodo has already said that the government can fund only 20% of this. The other 80% will have to come from private investors. And the reality is, private investors are not going to come if they don't do big-time reform to their anti-business systems. So now we want to ask you, what do you think about Widodo's moving of the capital? Will it help Indonesia climb out of poverty? And would you like to change the capital of your country? Well, please leave your answer in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to visit our friends from reconsidermedia.com, the podcast that provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, don't forget that we publish brand new videos every week, so please do subscribe to this channel and hit that bell button so you won't miss any posts. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And as always, I'll see you next time.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.